Shaun, I think this is something that we see not in every lesson, but we'll certainly see it every day when golfers come in and they're warming up, and we love asking them, okay, what have you been working on? What are you trying to do in your swing? These kind of questions kind of give us an idea, because in many cases we're just meeting these guys for the first time. They really give us an idea of what the player is trying to do to implement the concepts, and it gives us a keen insight on how they're moving based on what they're trying to do.
And a lot of times their intent is almost the exact opposite of what we see with great players, and kind of that's what this video is going to talk about today.
This is a big one because this really sets in motion and really determines the rest of your golf swing.
So we'll talk about the poor concepts first. The first one is trying to make the first part of the backswing by being really stable and not moving anything here in your lower body.
Right, so kind of, I'm not going to sway, right? Maybe that golfer used to do this, or something. So he's going to lock in and get the club moving, all right? Not good.
No. Second poor concept, kind of the opposite of that. In the other direction, they're just cranking their hips as much as they can and getting as much turn as they can early, almost to the point where they're backing their rear end or sliding their hips forward as they do it.
Yeah, so this one really applies as almost a reaction to concept number one. So we've all probably heard that restricted hip turn is bad. So in golfers' mind, we always think in opposites in golf. If I'm not going to restrict them, I'm going to have an unrestricted hip turn. And we see golfers in their 60s, 70s in some cases, turning 60 to 7 degrees in the backswing. That's equally as damaging to your golf swing.
Instead, here's what we see with the tour level pivot. We see a shift to the right very early in the backswing with the lower body. So it sets the weight and pressure on this trail foot. As the club gets about right here, that shifting is as far as it's going to be away from the target.
Yeah, very early, right? And it's far more lateral than rotational, certainly feel. And if you're aware of that, you can see it. But a good way to look at this is to look at a golfer from the behind view, from the butt view, without the camouflage of the arms and club, and you'll see this movement to start to swing. It's a trigger in a lot of respects. And you'll even see some golfers actually rotate open as they're sliding away from the target. But it's certainly not a whipping the hips closed in the backswing.
Yeah, exactly right. And that sets up a whole lot of good things as you're taking the club away. One of them being you can get the correct tilts and you're not reverse pivoting your hips toward the target. So you get a lot of benefit from that. And it helps you get the club in a good spot here as you're making your takeaway. Because if you overturn, it gets the club too far inside. If you don't move at all, it becomes almost this two arm dominant takeaway.
The key number to remember here in this takeaway is 2 to 1, right? The upper body's going to rotate twice as much as the lower body. So you can think of a little lateral move with the lower body as the upper's turning. That will turn the hips. You don't have to think about turning the hips in the takeaway. Heading into that second phase of the swing, or the second key of the swing, which is up near the top in the transition. And we see two really false concepts, we'll call them, right here.
Yeah, so the first one is having the maximum amount of weight or shift to the right as the club reaches the top of the swing. Mm-hmm. So it's, you would think about it as like loading up. Over the years, people have thought, oh yeah, I want to have most of my, or all my weight on my right or trail foot as the club gets ready to change direction. That's a bad thing to do. That's
bad. And the second one would be sitting into that hip to try to create some hip depth.
It's this late sit into the hip here, almost trying to load the right side of your rear end basically, or load the hip up.
Exactly, yeah. It's that loading. You can kind of see it, and you almost really see the player sit, and it takes such a long time to get out of that hip.
And the problem is the guys that do it usually launch the hip
to
start the downswing, and that creates a whole other host of issues.
It's a whole kettle of fish there that you want to stay out of, absolutely.
Yeah. So don't feel like you have to sit into that.
Yeah, so you don't want to be max loaded at the top, and you don't want to sit into this right hip, or if you're a right-handed golfer, sit into that trail hip as you get to the top. Instead, what we want to do.
Yeah, so basically, if I'm as far right as I'm ever going to get here, as the club reaches the top, as I'm still turning, I just want to recenter or back. I'm going to take my rear end and just back it in towards the target a little while I'm still turned. That's recentering.
Right. So, and hopefully you've heard of that term by now. And we kind of coined this years ago. So you basically start at address in the center, right, of your swing, right here. At the top, you want to get back to that center, not forward, certainly not on the right. And you hit on something there that's extremely important for that to happen. As you said, Here's when the club's gonna be the farthest away from the target. That's when I can be the farthest away, right?
Yep.
Then as that club starts to point, I just kind of fall with it back to the middle, then I'm done.
That's it.
It's very much a flow movement that's very athletic. You do it if you threw a ball, you would do the exact same thing.
Or if you had a really heavy like sledgehammer,
Right.
you would kind of start it here and swing it over. That's how you would, that little middle part of the swing where you're backing in a little bit gives you a chance to get some momentum in that heavy object with sledgehammer, or in this case, that's how you would move this the fastest.
And both of those are backswing movements. The shift off the ball is in the backswing, the shift back to the middle is in the backswing.
That's confusing for people because usually they associate with forward motion, with forward rotation.
Right.
The trick to all this is as you're still making your backwards rotation, that's when you make the recentering happen. And that's what kind of frees the whole swing up. We've seen people do this and like the light bulb will go off when you do it right because it feels so natural.
So for this third key, and we could do a whole video just on pouring concepts with this, one of the biggest ones we see is when golfers come out of the top in an effort to really get cranking with the hips, right? And it's this cranking of the hips like this where the tail goes back, the chest is kind of forward, and you see this ton of hip flexion there in the right hip. And it gives you nowhere to go through the ball.
No, Mike made a good point there. Everyone thinks, oh, rotation is like the golden key, but
Right.
how are you doing it, right? Because I could just spin around my back foot like
Right.
Mike's showing there and have my body this way.
That's not very tour-like.
I'm open. I'm 90 degrees open, but there's no way I'm going to hit the ball solid like that.
Nowhere.
So the change to that would be, we've already recentered, right? We've got the left knee bent more than the right in this old trail lead. To get to the ball now, I'm going to continue to move forward with the pelvis is going to shift forward, but I'm going to switch my knees. So now this one's straight and this leg becomes vertical.
Yeah, so let's wind it up to the backswing.
Okay, so I've
So
recentered.
left knee's gonna double and bend, right knee's gonna maybe lose a couple degrees.
Yeah, you'll see it like this.
Okay?
Yeah.
Then you're just gonna do the opposite in the downswing.
So I've already got some momentum going back toward the target from my recentering.
Yep.
I'm just going to ride that momentum and let my knees switch. So now this is vertical, this is straight, and this is where people get off track. They were so worried about early extension that they're trying to keep, and this is where Mike's thought comes in, keeping the hips in this awkward position. When you let your knees switch, you've got to let the right side of your rear end come off the wall so that your right leg can kind of get into this hitting area, and that would keep the left side of my rear end back.
It's literally kind of almost a mirror of the backswing. So instead of this bend, right, this hip flexion, and like that coming into play, you're getting at something like this where this thigh is now more vertical coming into the ball, right? Just like it is on the backswing with the left leg.
Yeah, it's a mirror image. You know, your shift and turn pulls this leg in, your back end shift and turn will pull this leg in, but you've got to understand that the left knee bends and the right knee bends to get yourself into this kind of tour-like position. But just to reiterate, you know, this is not early extension if this is coming off. Everyone's so afraid to do this. If I do it correctly, now the left side is on the wall, which is what we're looking for.
Right. You will get all the rotation you want or need by changing knee flex,
Yeah.
right? By working the knees correctly, that rotates the hips a bunch. Twisting the hips won't do that for you.
Yeah, you're okay to turn your hips. If you do it correctly with the knee bends,
Right.
your tilts will kind of be the governor.
Exactly right. You got to have the tilts in there.
Yeah, so if I have my footwork correct, my knees are working correctly, that puts the hips on the right tilt. Now my upper body and arms can swing on the right motion. It all starts with how the knees, the feet, and the legs are kind of working through the hip.
So you adopt these three keys, and you may only need one, you may just need two, you may need all three. If you adopt these three keys in your swing at all these different phases of the swing, you will start to have that tour-like pelvis motion, which is rotation for most of you in your golf swing. It's as simple as that. You do this at each phase. Don't just jump to the downswing one if you've got issues in the backswing. Start, check yourself at each phase. We put them in order. You clean those up, you will start to move your pelvis very, very well in the golf swing. If you found this video helpful and you need more help with your consistency, we want to help you with that. Go to the first comment below this video. You'll see a link. It's our first pinned comment. There'll be a link in there. Click on that link. We'll take you to our #1 consistency drill to help you hit the ball more solidly and more consistent every time you're out on the course.